Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Simplifying Compliance in Life Sciences with Engineering Document Management. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandy Berry, Program Manager at ISPE, and now let's get started by introducing our speakers for today. Livia Wiley, Industry Leader at Synergis Software, John Zolek, Director of Digital Transformation Technology Services at IPS, and Craig Schuler, Solution Architect at Synergis Software.
All right, let's do this again. Sorry about that, folks. All right, so quick preview of today's webinar. I'm going to begin with a high-level view of engineering document control systems as a solution for asset information lifecycle management. And then I'm going to turn it over to John. John's going to speak about simplifying compliance, sharing his success, their company's success in implementing Synergis Adept for simplified compliance at MSD. And finally, Craig will provide a product demonstration so you can see firsthand the benefits of Adept. So who is Synergis Software and what makes this an authority on the topic? Well, we've been developing, implementing, and supporting engineering document management systems for over 35 years. So we have a lot of hard-earned experience. Our flagship product is called Adept. It's an engineering document management system. It's consistently ranked #1 in over 30 categories on G2, including best results, best ROI, highest user adoption, and best support. This year, we are happy to share that we were rewarded with the G2 2026 Best Software Award, a win in the CAD and PLM category. But I think most importantly, we're trusted by many of the world's best companies, and you're going to hear from one of them today. All right, we've got a poll, which Brandy will launch. The question is, how confident are you that your facility's documentation is accurate, accessible, and audit ready? All right, looks like it's very confident or somewhat confident. That's awesome. Kind of expected to a certain degree, I suppose. Confidence comes from control. So if you have control using a centralized system of record, that's going to be your best choice. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So we all know that facilities are not run by assets, they're run by documents. But those assets, whether it's a batch reactor or a pill press or a vial filler, whichever, depend on accurate contextualized engineering information. When drawings, models, and specifications are connected to these equipment and the plant, they become operationally meaningful. This is what enables maintenance teams to act quickly, operators to make informed decisions, and compliance teams to trust that data. When information is connected to assets, it becomes operationally meaningful. It's not just stored content. Without that connection, documents are just static files, not meaningful in plant intelligence. We all know that engineering information doesn't stay static. It evolves across the entire asset lifecycle. So from design to capital projects to commissioning and startup and maintenance, operations, plant expansions, those sorts of things. Each phase introduces new data, new documents, changing conditions, new risk, new stakeholders. So even if we look at a 30 to 50 year life cycle, we know even small little gaps can cause major risks. But the idea here, the key idea is this continuity of information, right? If information doesn't flow cleanly from one phase to another, it degrades, it becomes unreliable. So let's talk a little bit about what happens in real projects and using our documents. So teams start with good information, right? But without proper document control, documents leave those control systems through, let's say, emails or SharePoint, shared drives. You get different versions. You've got contractor workflows, and this all causes versions to diverge. People then start to do work on outdated data. So then you start getting inconsistencies and uncertainty. That all is going to lead to rework, delays, field errors, delayed handover, all sorts of things that can happen. Now, the loss of the control is not really necessarily immediate, but it begins subtly as documents leave that governed system. So over time, this creates divergence between the teams and data sources. and the documentation then no longer reflects the actual facility. Now, what happens next is that project drift turns into configuration drift. And it's subtle, but it happens when you get the accumulated result of unmanaged lifecycle change. As designed, as built, as operated, and as modified states fall out of sync, then your actual plant data doesn't match the actual engineering data. And so what happens then is you have things like safety risks, operational errors, shutdown exposure, compliance issues, and costly change management orders. Well, lucky for you, lucky for me, an EDMS prevents that configuration drift. That's what it was designed to do. So an engineering document management system ensures that engineering information flows consistently across design, build, and operations without ever losing control. It creates a digital thread whereon each phase builds on the trusted data from the previous one. So documents and data are neatly tied together into a single source of truth. Most importantly, an EDMS keeps engineering information aligned with real-world manufacturing conditions. And of course, this alignment is critical for managing compliance risk. Now, let's think about this from one step further than what we're looking at today. How does an EDMS form the foundation for future digital operations? So we're all into creating digital twins and analytics and predictive maintenance, creating those AI tools that provide so much value. But the problem is they all depend on accurate information. If you have poor information that those models are designed on, you're going to get poor results, right? So without a single source of truth, those digital transformation initiatives, whether you create them today or years from now, we're going to fail. So the idea here is you want to tie the physical asset to engineering management for the purposes of using digital intelligence in forms of initiatives, but based on trusted data. All right, so what does good engineering documentation management look like? Well, a good EDMS should address everyday risks, right? Everyday risks like uncontrolled, outdated documentation. This can lead to equipment being set up incorrectly, increased risk of deviation, and a loss of validated state. Or you may have the issue of delayed or limited access to information. This can cause delays from time lost searching for information, increased operator errors, and added rework. Lack of an audit trail can present regulatory risks with gaps in ALCOA plus failed audits and potential quality and safety issues. These aren't theoretical. These are things you deal with every day. In GXP environments, uncontrolled information is not just about efficiency. It directly impacts compliance, product quality, and patient safety. So some of the essential benefits of a EDMS really comes down to what is important in your particular industry. So when it comes to life sciences and pharma, we're looking at primarily traceability, a tool that allows you to have audit traceability with full record retention and data integrity. So an effective EDMS addresses these challenges with core capabilities. It centralizes access to the latest approved documents, enforces version control, and provides full traceability in the cloud or on-premise. It also enables secure collaboration and integrates into engineering workflows. The result here is fewer errors, faster approvals, better compliance, and improved productivity. But what does this really look like in a manufacturing facility? So I thought I'd put a little workflow together so you can get the idea of how a document that's maintained in a system record should look like as it's being used in the different teams of your plant. So the engineering or validation team creates validated documentation, things like P&IDs, URS, IQ, OQ, PQ records, all those, all in a system of record that is GXP compliant and audit ready. Those documents are managed, maintained, and controlled within the EDMS so that When the technician scans an asset tag, they can instantly pull up the correct P&ID within the same system of record supporting your Alcoa Plus data integrity. A maintenance planner then accesses the latest revision from within the EDMS without ever having to call the engineering or quality team. We all know that using the wrong version is what's going to create the compliance risk, so this is a big deal. The turnaround team responsible for the work does so from a controlled, approved set of documents, ensuring 21 CFR Part 11 and GMP compliance. And the last step is making sure that the changes that are made are then captured and flow back in that system record. That's going to serve as the backbone of your regulatory compliance. So this is what a true source, single source of truth looks like in practice. So let me cover a few little operational impacts just to give you a sense of the impact for an EDMS, some data that we presented that we have from customers. So the first one is around growth. So EDMS accelerates project cycles, helping teams deliver faster with fewer errors. It reduces waste and costly rework by keeping everyone aligned to the same information. And it creates the framework for innovation, right? Because teams can move quickly and confidently knowing that the documentation they're using is accurate and accessible. The next one is lower risk, which is kind of the central theme for our simplified compliance. With an EDMS, you can dramatically lower the chance of safety incidences because everyone's working from the same correct real-time documentation. You're also better equipped for compliance audits with full traceability at your fingertips. And finally, you're protecting your intellectual property and ensuring data integrity, which is critical for long-term business resilience. And finally, uptime is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Maintenance and field teams often spend hours searching for the right document. With an EDMS, that information is instantly available. That means fewer delays, faster fixes, and lower costs. The result is a longer asset lifecycle and a safer, more productive operation. And now we have a poll 2, which is talking about which benefit of an EDMS is most important to you. Now, the focus here is going to be on compliance, which John's going to cover in a minute, but there can certainly be other benefits that interest you. And I believe the poll is set up to be multi-select. So the options you have here are growth and efficiency, so faster projects, less rework. Risk reduction, so again, centralizing on safety and compliance. Increased uptime, which is maintenance and reliability. Asset lifecycle management, which is looking at the configuration drift between projects, the plant and engineering data. And the last one around the digital thread, using an EDMS single source of truth as the basis for digital initiatives. So we'll put that one up for a little bit. Okay, we've ended. So we have a nice distribution here, a little bit higher on the risk reduction, our topic today, and asset lifecycle management. It's a nice mix because really we all know when we look at these things, they're all tied together, right? Priorities, we all have different priorities, but the root issue is the same. We need to have confidence and certainty in the data that we're using. So no matter the priority, the outcome is better outcomes start with better data that's trusted and accurate. So at this point, I'll turn it over to John, but I will drive the slides. So there you go, John. If you want to share, go ahead and share Merck's experience, your experience with Merck's application.
Sure. Hey, folks. Again, my name is John Nislik. I'm the Director of Digital Transformation Technology Services and Med Gases at IPS. And as the team mentioned, I've been a partner with Synergis for several years now, helping implement and validate EDMS platforms across many of our clients. Today, we're going to do a client study, kind of a showcase on one of the MSD implementations we helped implement and manage, and kind of walk you through that process, what that looks like. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, who is MSD? You know, they're a global leader in the overall life sciences industry, development, manufacture of medicines, vaccines, biologic therapeutics, animal health products. Their headquarters is Rahway, New Jersey. Revenue is about $48.7 billion. This was back in 2021, with about 68,000 employees as well. Next slide. Background and scope. So MSD really needed a centralized, validated system to manage and store their CAD files. Version control was very important, and then creating user workflows or automated user workflows is important. And then segregating different sites data, because obviously with the many locations, a large organization, some of that information is very specific to sites, and there you wouldn't want to have that information cross. Users, the audience was maintenance users, engineers, for designing and rising, and then obviously various support organizations that help support the business itself. CAD files were typically facility and floor plans, construction manufacturing areas, above ground utilities, etc. And the scope really focused initially on the United States and Ireland, but then they planned the global expansion, which they have gone through. Next slide. Okay, so legacy system challenges. So some of the challenges that Merck has with any client who has large numbers of CAD files, the system was in place, and it was deprecated over 10 years. It was based off a Windows XP platform, which obviously wasn't supported by Microsoft. There was a lot of customization, which really negatively impacted the system's performance as a whole, and from the time that was implemented. And the vendor that they were actually purchasing the platform from no longer supported the platform. So it really was a big impact on costs overall. And mentioned the support infrastructure was outdated, and because of the age of the platform and the actual code of the system, they were not able to actually migrate it to Windows 10 systems. Basically what happened was the way they approached this project was to poll all of their engineers and CAD groups to say, what are your requirements? What are your needs? They developed those requirements in a core team, and then sent those questionnaires out to multiple vendors and solution providers, of which they were able to go out, and Synergis was selected in the end. So criteria, obviously one of the most important components was the baseline criteria. Part 11 compliance, the audit and traceability, file type support for the formats that they were used. Because they were a mixed environment of MicroStation and AutoCAD, that was important to them as well. Logical variables, configurable workflows, bulk import and export capabilities, checking out of files for projects, and the quality. Really, they look at customer support because they lacked that with the previous platform. So what they were trying to do is displaying cross-reference files. They wanted to be able to see that information, reference cross files, nest cross files were necessary, and then they were circular cross-references were also important to understand and resolve. And resolving drawing issues that they had were, model paper space issues and tabs, sheet file management, layers and levels inside of drawings, colors, weights, thicknesses, the common things that many organizations are challenged with across those digital platforms.
Okay.
So the approach for implementation and migration. So the upfront, the initial portions were the server configuration, the application configuration, making sure that those requirements were met in a configurable platform. Data card development is important. It's key to all of these systems to understand where your metadata is tagged and how those assets, which are required, which are optional, and making sure that your drawings and object had the elements inside them that it needed. Training was critical also, training administrators, user training, and developing user training materials. And then obviously the next portion, which became a separate project, was the migration of much of the legacy data that was there, terabytes and terabytes, hundreds of thousands of drawings. So the approach to validation really was risk-based approach. They kind of looked at the biggest critical impacts were the privacy information, HR data risks, GDPR components, PAI stuff initially for the first portion, but then looked into your quality assurance plans, look at impacts there, the design specifications. Realistically, where this all came down to, this came out of a near miss that almost happened. So they had to look at that risk and how it impacted all of these areas: test scripts, test execution, project management, and then selecting a partner was important as well. IPS was lucky enough to be part of that program as part of the RFP, and they selected us based on the fact that we had internal references from previous Merck projects. This is typically the standard approach to validation. So they looked at they started with risk first, looked at a quality assurance plan, developed a quality plan around it, and then looked at so Merck was very risk adverse, so everything that they do electronically or IT related goes through vulnerability scans and process of security vetting. So it looked at the impact, the risk, and the security aspects of these systems. Obviously, the requirements, specifications were developed out of the requirements that were happened early on in the project. They looked at a traceability matrix back to doing this, like developing and testing and rolling out the tests. Standard V model kind of deliverables that you see here with the summary plans, the IQs, the user acceptance tests. Change controls were put in place to manage the changes across site. And then obviously released to production. And then at the end, the overall quality assurance summary to release the system for use. So lessons learned for Merck, just speaking on their behalf, the communication was critical, and as it really related to degrees in data accuracy. I know early on in the project we had some communication challenges, which we had to looked at finding unified platforms to address those communication platforms. So Teams are used heavily, and then some other internal communication channels. Synergis, Merck could have given Synergis access to the data a little bit earlier in the project. To help the migration of data and understanding some of the key requirements. Then MSD business team could have been more involved earlier to understand in the core testing and configuration requirements. So, meaning what this means is that the team really wanted to understand, I guess post project, like lessons learned. They said, if we were done a bit earlier, we could have actually given some kind of stricter requirements and configuration excuse me. And then obviously more due diligence during the design and data migration phases because of the legacy platforms. There were a lot of unknowns and a lot of unsupported issues that they ran into during this process. So if they would have dug a little bit deeper, a little bit earlier, they may have been aware of those things, could have avoided some risks. And then, the last one here was more of an awareness thing where I think having your compliance partner involved earlier on is probably the best path forward. Only because we could have, IPS could have kind of raised flags when they saw compliance risks or impacts to the actual validation or compliance of the system early on. Obviously benefits we kind of talked about across all the EDMS platforms. What the benefits that MSD realized right away was version control, improved the compliance risk of the profile across the board. Adept became the centralized source of truth for all engineering documents and resources. It can be easily customized to workflows. So that was actually really nice that you could have multiple workflows and many different layers and levels of workflows. And then it was obviously a modern system that met the changing needs of the business, meaning that it wasn't a deprecated Windows XP platform. It was a modern, current client or vendor supported platform. And it did meet all the CGMP requirements for them. Okay, so obviously IPS, the next slide, please. We basically, the partnership that we have, the collaborative services. So IPS and Synergis has been working together, like I mentioned early on, for several years now. We've helped implement and support compliance validations of the platforms across many of our clients. And what that kind of does for our clients or the benefit of the client is that we're experts in compliance and understand how to validate systems, whether they're premise-based or cloud-based platforms. And Synergis is an expert in the EDMS platform. So the two of us together really complemented the project well. Kind of the background, because as we mentioned earlier, IPS was selected by Merck and MSD because of the previous long-time provider for services to Merck and MSD and their affiliated companies across all their areas of business and operations. And again, this request came in through internal referrals from Synergis and Merck staff, so it really helped as a strong case to leverage IPS for the process. And again, some of the challenges we see with EDMS platforms across all compliance was meeting current regulatory compliance requirements for ERES, or Electronic Records and Signatures, Part 11, Annex 11, and general regulatory guidance for data integrity. Management change is also another big and challenging area of issues that we see across many of our clients. Security of the system, audit and traceability and reporting, which is obviously key to having the supporting the Alcoa++ principles. And then obviously the integrity of your records and data. One thing that I really do like about the platform itself, I like to call it a metadata management platform. your original record is indelible. It's always the same record, regardless of all the changes that you make on top of that. And that's super powerful, especially from a version management and a regulatory compliance standpoint, knowing that your records are intact regardless of the changes that are made on multiple layers above. And then I guess project for our lessons learned from the IPS side, obviously early engagement was very, very important at all levels, from the implementation level up to the management level, where we could convey up to the compliance team and the quality team kind of the important elements or issues we may have seen. Utilization of resources familiar with the client process and system. So because we had that long-standing experience, we were familiar with the Merck process, their systems, their policies and procedures. So it helped kind of streamline some of the work that we did. So that was a key thing for us to be able to support. And then understanding user and business requirements. This is a lesson learned. This was a challenge in the beginning because, like I mentioned early on, is that the legacy platform that was there, it really wasn't clear how the system functioned and how it operated. So we had to learn a lot while we were going. So understanding what they previously did was very important to making things happen down the road during this project. Design, plan, test, and retest. That's kind of a known thing. And then shared communication platforms. So leveraging Teams and other means of communication was important to make sure we had shared data quickly and accurately. And then obviously the last piece was the data migration and translation. Adept, our Synergis does a great job at doing that migration and translation. But when you have systems such as the ones that were in place Merck previously, it made for a challenge. And that's obviously key to making sure everything works properly.
Okay, thank you, John. I'd like to spend maybe about a minute and a half just giving you an overview of the software that we have that covers lifecycle management on the data side. I've talked a little bit about EDMS, so I won't spend a whole lot of time because we've got Craig coming up with a demo, but let's talk about the high level. So Adept ensures that documentation, this reflects what John just said, are not just stored, but they remain accurate, controlled, and accessible. It means when someone pulls a drawing or a spec or any other documentation, they can trust it because it reflects the current state of the facility. We talked about secure collaboration. It's highly important when you have contractors and external partners, making sure that you're not losing revision control and introducing version risk, that others aren't working using outdated documents. It supports engineering change management and plant configuration control. So going back to configuration drift, making sure that the physical plants align with the engineering definition. On the right-hand side, we have some of the benefits, reducing errors and redesign cycles because teams are no longer working on outdated or conflicting information, improved project handover between engineering data transitions cleanly from projects into operations, reducing any field surprises, so unexpected issues that either happen in startup or compliance in other areas because what you see on paper actually match reality. And then ultimately, implementing such a solution is going to help you ensure and enable safer, more reliable operations, more compliant as well, because decisions are based on trusted, governed information. So like I said, I only spent like 30 seconds on each of these, but essentially we have a suite. EDMS is what we've been talking about for the most part in this presentation, but I just want to introduce you to Adept Catalyst and Adept Integrator. Might be a good fit or conversation starter with IPS or even Synergis to get an idea of how these all fit together. So Adept Catalyst, capital projects usually require collaboration with contractors, suppliers, external vendors, all sorts of things. Some customers use Adept to do this. Obviously, that's the ideal, but others also only use SharePoint. And so what Adept Catalyst does is it turns external collaboration with SharePoint into a controlled extension of the engineering system of record. So it controls what documents go out to projects and ensures updates come back through review, approvals, and version control. So projects move faster and operations receive a clean, reliable set of engineering documentation. So Adept Catalyst allows you to accelerate project execution while preserving that documentation integrity, reducing operational risk, rework, and closeout surprises. And the last one here is around integrator. Adept Integrator is for systems integration. And so it allows you to connect Adept with all your enterprise business systems that you have to eliminate those data silos. So Integrator automates the workflows and data exchange across the application. So as you see along the bottom, your ERP, your CMMS, your EAM, SCADA, even using with different applications with AI. The platform allows you to reduce manual effort, input errors, and delays between systems because it keeps all the systems synchronized with accurate, up-to-date information. If you were to look into this a little bit more, it comes with some out-of-the-box connectors to some of your larger business systems like SAP, Maximo, Oracle P6, and things like that. So just a quick overview because I'm going to pass it on to Craig, who is going to show us a demo of Synergis Adept for those things that are important to life sciences and simplified compliance.
So everybody should see my screen and my background now. Yes?
Yes.
Good. So I just want to build a little bit on what John and Liv have been talking about and introduce you to how Adept can help you to generate that single source of truth and allow you to find documents and the audit trail and all that we've been talking about. So I brought up on the screen here the Adept web interface, just focusing on the EDMS side of searching for documents and how they're tracked and managed. One of the tools that you get with Adept is the ability to full text search. If I type in a word or a phrase in the upper left-hand corner, I can get a list of results searching all the text content of the documents. So John mentioned metadata. That's also going to be tracked and managed. I'm going to show that to you in just a second. But full text searching creates a whole new way for users to find documents without even thinking about metadata for a second. So all the text content in a drawing, a DWG or a DGN, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, and in text-rich PDFs becomes a searchable resource. So now, like I did the search for initial, that's in multiple different file types that I can find that. So asset tag numbers, wire numbers, all kinds of just general text that might be contained in your documents is now a searchable resource. John mentioned metadata. Inside of Adept, you can create multiple kind of multi-field kind of searches very easily, or single field searches using what we call the search card, and then the data card, which is all the metadata properties or fields of information that you're tracking about your documents. Every Adept customer gets to decide what fields they want on this card. This is a configurable interface so that you can track exactly what you need to about your documents. You might want to tag a document as a turnover document, so it's easy to collect those when documents shift from to a maintenance status and easily collect them up. Or you might be working with documents that are concurrent engineering type documents, so you have master copies and project copies. Any number of fields of information you might want to track here, and all the fields that you see become a searchable resource. Adept also gives you the ability to create what we call file guide views, which are virtual folder structures where I can now sort documents based on the metadata fields. So if we're using we've got a number of different facilities, we might use state, city, site, and facility as locations of creating different kind of ways for users to find documents with just a couple of clicks. This is all, again, based on that metadata that we were talking about on my data card here, where I have the state, city, site, and facility fields. These fields are linked or related together to give users smart lists to pick from, and then these values will drive this virtual folder structure that we call a file guide view. File guide views are great ways for users to find documents with a couple of clicks instead of needing to type in criteria. Adept also takes advantage of a traditional Windows folder structure. We call this the library browser. This is where you can create different sites or different locations or different business units or different ways of grouping documents together for certain security purposes. At its core, Adept is really just using a Windows folder structure, and that's what you see right here, which allows you to specify security and control who can access documents or not see documents for that matter. Adept also gives you the ability to work with favorites lists. So I can click on a list of a specific title I might have given to a static list or a saved search, so I can regularly go to a set of documents I need to work with on a regular basis. Whenever you click on a document, you're guaranteed that that is the latest version of that document. So this is the latest version of my drawing 155. If I turn on the document dashboard, now we can start to see all the data and the control that Adept is providing you with the audit trail. So you can see all the events that have ever happened to this document when the document's been viewed, checked out, checked in, reviewed, approved, rejected, any event that happens. This is all searchable, reportable data that allows you to track how documents are being used on an individual basis or overall within the system. The version tab allows you to see the version or revision history. I mentioned how when I clicked on a file, this is guaranteed to be the latest version. The version tab will show me the version revision history of this document. So this document's actually been checked out and checked in a couple of times, and these are previous versions of that document that were created through the checkout, check-in, and review process. Also, we can see here how documents have relationships to other documents. On this MicroStation file here, this DGN, you can see in the lower left-hand corner how this document has children documents where documents are, one drawing is put into another drawing. Adept tracks and manages all those references and relationships. We actually extract them out of the CAD files, store the relationships inside of the Adept database, and by maintaining a reference integrity, drawing files can be moved and renamed, and those references will not break. We do this for a number of different CAD packages like MicroStation, AutoCAD, Inventor, and SolidWorks, creating a way for users to easily work with referenced files and have a reference integrity. This reference information is also reflected on the Children tab, where I can see what version each child is, or the Where Used tab allows me to look back up a tree and see what parents a child have. So from a CAD perspective, managing these references and relationships can make working with your CAD documents much easier, because then you can easily identify broken references like you see here. This tells me right now this drawing would give me an error when I went to go to open it because it's missing that reference file. If I were to bring this file back into Adept and put it in the system, I can repair the reference. This is all part of the out-of-the-box CAD integration that Adept has to manage parent-child relationships and the reference integrity. Also built into Adept is a visualization or a viewing tool that allows non-CAD users to view hundreds of file formats without having those native applications. So on the screen here, you can see here, this is my 155 drawing, an electrical drawing as an example. I can zoom in and out. I can pan around. I can view this. I can also text search inside of the document. So when I did that full text search earlier to find a wire number or an asset tag number, I can now do a search and find that string right inside the text document. We can also put two documents next to each other. You see here, I'm looking at an old version, one of those versions that was on my version tab. I brought that up, and I'm going to put both of these next to each other now. So I have the old version and the new version side by side, and I'm going to use the viewer here to compare them. This is going to overlay these two files on top of each other and now show me the graphical differences between these files. When working with outside sources and receiving files back, or just trying to understand as-built, reversion history, this compare capability will allow you to easily see the graphical differences between files. This is all built into our visualization and viewing capabilities. And one last thing the viewer also lets you do is it lets you mark up files. So now as documents maybe are in some sort of a maintenance or a project type situation, and you need to add some comments and notes to a file, someone out in the field can do that. This is not editing the file. This is a way of creating electronic information that might be conveyed back to a project manager or an engineer or a drafter as a way to convey what's being done in the field or through some review and approval process. Those kind of markups can be really helpful to tracking electronically what's done to documents out in the field or through the review process, as I mentioned. As we talk about review processes, let's go ahead and check out a file. That's going to put this file into a work in progress state. Oops, let's refresh here. Let's go ahead and check out a file now. Okay, actually, let's check it out I wanted to also check it out from here. Let's introduce you to the desktop interface, which also is another interface that ties to our CAD. At first, I showed you the web interface. Now, using the desktop interface here, we can highlight a file, we can check it out. This is going to put that document into a work in progress state, starting a change process if you want. When documents are checked out, that automatically adds another row to that version tab so that we're maintaining that revision history. And now you can see that file is checked out to a user named Adam. If I look at the document dashboard, you'll see here on my version tab, I'll have a new row that this file is currently checked out. All other users right now have access to the last released version, while Adam is the only one that has access to the work in progress version. Now, when Adam's done making changes, something that also was talked about with John and Liv was the ability to visualize or track workflow approval processes. When this file is checked in, I now want it to be routed to the appropriate managers or people or users for them to do the approval process. So now you'll see that document went from a status of out to a status of review. And now I can look at the workflow tab, and I can see that this document is going through a review process called design review, and is on the CAD manager step. This is just an example of a review process. Inside of Adept, you can create as many or as few different workflows. You can have some documents that do go through for workflow, some documents that don't. All depends on what you need to do, from a review approval process. I also created a view inside of Adept here that just shows me or gives me the ability to visualize my workflows and approval processes. So I see here I've got a number of different active reviews. Design review I was just talking about, as-built review. Here's all the documents that are currently in the as-built review, or I can now go look at documents that are at a specific step. Maybe here's the drafting submitted changes step. I can look at who these documents are assigned to or owned by and help to identify bottlenecks, how long documents have been waiting at certain steps, and just at its core, keep documents moving through the review approval process as I need to. You'll also see transmittal sent out. This is also getting into another part of the core Adept. As you're working with outside vendors and contractors and engineering firms, you might have a need to track a transmittal process. This could also be used internally. Adept has transmittal capabilities built in, so you can create PDF cover letters, not using a spreadsheet and not having to type a lot of data in or a Word document. Adept can use metadata, and based on a template form that you can create, we can create cover letters for you like this, with your logo and whatever content you might want. I didn't have to type anything in to create this form. This is all based on the template and all the metadata that we have in the documents and inside of Adept, giving me the ability to track at a very granular level who I send what to when, because this is all based on relationships. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see the tree structure of this is the documents that you saw in the form. On the Children tab, I can see exactly what version each document was when I attached it and sent it out. And on the Transmittal tab, I can see exactly who I sent this to and when. This isn't just limited to my email. Everybody using the system has the ability to see this. So if I'm on vacation, someone else can easily resend that transmittal or do an update on it and knows exactly what was sent to this customer at that date and time. This is all built into core Adept functionality, giving the ability to track your transmittal process. Maybe as part of that process, you'll want to set a return date or track the dates they're sent, a due date, if you will, and things like that. All very easily within the metadata or the transmittal process. Liv, I think I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to you. I think you had a couple more slides and we had one more poll.
I think I have one more slide. Let's see here.
I can just move it along if you want.
Yeah, bring it up. Go ahead. So just as a wrap up, I think you've kind of understood the sense of this presentation, that engineering information really defines how a plant operates. If you have poor control, that creates real plant risk, both from the operational and compliance side. Good control is what eliminates it, right? So facilities that implement asset information lifecycle management, using a single trusted source for that information, is going to have the following benefits, which are more efficient projects, safer, more compliant, reliable operations, better performance and compliance, and then of course enabling digital operations. So we'll stop there. So we have a good 10 or 15 minutes to do questions. And I think Brandy, you're going to take over from here.
Did you want to do the final poll first?
No, we don't have it in here.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Great. I think we do have some questions from the audience.
Yes, we do. How does this software and general concept impact smaller companies? Is there a level of system that allows you to pick and choose what is the best fit for smaller companies? I would say yes to that. Adept is very scalable. You know, Merck is on the large side of companies, obviously. We have lots of very small companies that still use Adept. You know, it just kind of depends on what you need it for. You know, we can configure different types of workflows, and you know, it's very scalable to meet the requirements of small or medium or large size organizations. John, I think you would probably agree with that and some of how IPS works also, correct?
That is correct. The platform is very scalable. You can truly, it's based on the number of documents that are in the system, as far as licensing as well. So there's a lot of different options for different size organizations, and we've seen it work on, you know, from companies, you know, mid-size to large-size organizations. And I think you mentioned, depending on the space you're in, it can be used for. It could obviously integrated. Excuse me. Let me pause. It integrates into many platforms that are existing. And it's very flexible. So yeah, truly flexible for your needs.
Thanks. What does an audit trail actually look like in practice? I showed you the tab that shows all the audit trail events per document. That's all searchable, reportable data in both a dashboard tool and at the administrative level. So those events, as well as when users log in, log out, and a whole bunch of system events are all tracked as you need to present that, you know, to generate the appropriate report for an auditor. That's just in the box, out of the box, all that we do that naturally. Can a validation package be leveraged across multiple sites? I would say yes to that. John, John, do you have a comment on that one? Thinking of validation wise?
Yep. So actually, that's kind of the approach we took with Merck, and you can use it across, because if it's a premise-based solution, it can still be managed. You can have multiple sites in one instance, or if it's a cloud solution, same kind of concept. You're validating the underlying, your intended use of the system. So all the systems-based features and functions are fully regression tested by Synergis at their end. And I know documentation for some of their testing is shared, so you can leverage a lot of that. So make a long story short, I think you can definitely validate for many.
Thanks. Next question here is, which software or softwares have the best search functions? We use master control, but not for engineering drawings and specs. I'm not satisfied with how clunky searching for documents is. It's not like a Google search. I'm not confident in what I found. Actually, from an Adept perspective, our search tools get great reviews. And we're actually talking about adding more AI natural language searches in there too, to make it even more Google-like. I was just playing with that last week in our software convention. So yeah, searching on Adept is, you know, with full text search and all the metadata search capabilities, as well as, you know, is just kind of what Adept does in a very good way. So there. What is metadata? Is the next question here. Metadata refers to a set of data that's in a record in the database that's tied to a document. So metadata might be a title, it might be a description, it might be some other types of information that you're tracking the record in the database. Sometimes that metadata comes from the document itself, like an attribute in a title block or properties, or other times it's just information that the user has filled in. Some companies have, you know, 2 or 3 metadata fields. Other organizations might have 20. It just kind of depends on the document category or type that you're working with. Sometimes you have required fields. Sometimes there's optional fields. Some fields have pull down. Some fields you might do, you know, type in a value. It's just a set of data that's tied to a record, to that document, to create better ways of understanding the purpose of that document or to search for the document.
Craig, can I add one thing to that? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, John.
So to simplify metadata in layman's terms, it's really data about your data, or like a legend on a map. It really it ties your field information to the actual data itself, so you understand what that data is. Gives it context.
Exactly. It's a record in the database. Exactly. John, I think this question is going to be kind of for both of us. Is Adept validated out of the box, or does the customer validate it? Out of the box, Adept is not validated. That's where John plays a role.
Yeah.
in creating the validation for the customer.
Yeah. So realistically, your validation is your intended use. So obviously, for leveraging current CSA guidance, we'll leverage all of the documentation that Adept Synergis can share with you for the platform, for the testing that they do. So in turn, what you do is you're not going to have to validate the standard features and functions of the platform, but what you would validate is your workflows and your approvals, your documents in the system, your data. That's kind of the extent of the validation you have to go through.
Since I'm sharing my screen here, I thought I'd bring up the document dashboard here and just go back to the audit trail tab. So you can just kind of start to see all the events that we're tracking here. When documents are viewed, when a document is updated, checked out, checked in, when it was turned into a PDF, if it was marked up, if anything that ever happens to this document in its life cycle, we track and manage all those events. And I mentioned how we can do some dashboarding here too. Insights gives a user the ability to query their own individual audit trail, as well as the Adept administrator can query the audit trail. So I, as a user, could look at what files I've ever viewed, or what is the set of files I might have viewed last week if I want. So I can filter, here's the files that I viewed, and I can show me a list. So this is all querying the audit trail data that's automatically being tracked, as an example. So let's go back to the questions there. Oops, there we go. John, what was the incident that triggered the move to EDMS for engineering drawings and specs?
So I can't go into great detail. All I can tell you is that it was a near miss at the site, specifically for MSD. That was the example we were speaking of. What happens is that site it's in West Point, their global manufacturing headquarters. So that site has many, many buildings. I think there was 97, 98 buildings at the time, maybe more when we were doing this project. And what happened was there were older versions of an engineering drawing that they went to break ground, and they realized they almost hit very high power lines, which obviously would have been catastrophic. So what they realized is that the version that the engineers had versus the version that was actually maintained in the records were two different versions, and it could have cost someone's life potentially. So that was one of the reasons why they paused and said, we need to look at our records and really understand, and making sure that we have the most current versions of these documents that are issued as built.
Another question for you, John. What regulatory guideline, i.e. Annex 1, CFR, etc., motivated the move to EDMS for Merck? Do you know?
Yeah, actually, I think it had to do with, at the time, it was the issuance of the data integrity governance. I was personally involved in the global data integrity initiative they rolled out at those sites and those locations for MSD. And as part of that, they looked across all of their system as a whole, and they said that obviously the legacy system didn't have the ability for robust audit trails, searching, the generation of reports out of the system. So a lot of the components that you typically would leverage for your compliance around traceability, audit, security, infrastructure, things like that, that was kind of some of the underlying drivers for it. But yeah, it was really the push for the data integrity initiatives that came out across several, by 2018, I think is when it was published.
Cool. Can links be shared with email? I'm going to answer that one and say yes. We can easily share links into the system, or create attachments of PDFs very, very easily, no problem. Next question here is, how does Adept integrate with SAP? Does the integrator allow Adept folder structure creation based on SAP technological objects and can be used to navigate easily from SAP equipment records to documents in depth? The answer to that is yes, you nailed it. The integrator is our middleware that allows you to talk to different business systems like an SAP or an Oracle Primavera P6 or any number of systems. And that is a bi-directional kind of link where you develop the business process, creating asset information and many-to-many relationships and all kinds of different things we can do with that is exactly what the integrator does between an SAP and Adept. How do you handle PDF and their limitations of PDF parsing? Adept has the ability to create PDFs automatically for a number of files. We can batch produce those. We can also turn them into multi-page PDFs and things like that. And I'm not sure about the limitation on a PDF parsing, what you mean there. We do full text searching of PDFs that are text rich. We handle PDFs in a similar way to all other kinds of documents. So I think that's all the questions for now. Is there any more, Brandy?
No, I think we covered every question. So I think that worked out great with the timing. And if anyone does have any additional questions, we are showing our speakers' contact information on the screen now. It'll also be included in the PDF that you receive, so feel free to reach out if you do have any questions. On behalf of ISPE, I would like to thank John, Livia, and Craig for providing such great information today, Synergis for sponsoring the webinar, and then as well as all of our attendees for participating. Also, just want to share a bit about ISP membership. So we always strive to be here for your needs and encourage you to make the most of your membership by catching up on guides, communities of practice, and more. Again, you can visit ispe.org for more information. Again, I'd like to thank our speakers today and Synergis, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.